The 80s had The General. The 90s had John Gilligan. In the noughties, it was the reign of Martin Marlowe Hyland. His was a familiar path with success and power, and then the recklessness. He had to go, because with him, an innocent young man doing an honest day's work died. Crime World presents Caught in the Crossfire, the unsolved murders of coke kingpin Marlowe Hyland and innocent Anthony Campbell. Available now on all podcast platforms. You were just pointing out to me there that it's the internet that really allows these type of people find one another. I mean, you know, fantasies grow, psychologists will tell you, you know, and they start out as one thing and they can sometimes then, you know, the fantasist can move into the territory of making it actually become real. And that's when they become really dangerous. But like prior to being able to find one another online, that probably didn't develop as quickly or as...
No, because we're obviously talking about Gavin Plum, who was convicted this week of a plot to kidnap and rape the ITV presenter, or the former ITV presenter, Holly Willoughby. But you can see how this guy, he's a 30 stone kind of, you know, loner effectively. Yeah. And
spends all day online, he said, gorging on takeaways and coke.
Well, I mean, not cocaine. I think it was cocaine, like it was Coca-Cola. I think he...
Yeah,
I think he said he drank at one point 18 litres of the stuff a day or something. But, yeah. I mean, the point I suppose about it is these guys are obviously social misfits. Mm. In the pre-internet era, how would they have come across each other? And the reason we're speaking about Gavin Plum is that he was in communication with a guy that we wrote about back in 2014, a Dublin guy called Mark Mulligan, who sort of fits a similar profile.
Yeah, they even look a little bit similar. Now, how did you come across the initial story about Mark Mulligan, who you have a photograph of him, and hopefully we can use it on the pod here. He's dressed as He-Man. How did you come across the story?
I mean, at the time, he was convicted in the courts, right, obviously, and it was a big story at the time because Mark Mulligan had... He typed out these fantasies really involving, kidnapping and raping a child of a woman. But he'd also written out fantasies about a number of Irish celebrities, basically, RTE
females
reporter.
On the TV,
females
basically.
On the TV, nothing more elaborate than that. Mm-hmm. Some of the names were known, but they weren't really spoken about publicly. And he was convicted, and he was done for harassing the woman, and he was given a 3.5 year prison sentence. So, we tracked him down through social media, and then because of a certain name that he'd used at the time on social media, he'd also used that on a number of dating profiles. Mm. So it was, it was just one of the...
So the story was that this was this kind of stalker guy, and this was
his presentation that he gave to the world, because he was
stalking sort of television stars from this country.
Yes.
Plus he was also out on a dating app trying to present himself as something else.
Yeah, I mean, in the conviction, you heard about how he'd made reference to the children of a number of RTE celebrities and the kidnapping and raping those boys and girls, and that even his own defence barrister described it as a disgusting fantasy where Mulligan said he would love to rape the 3-year-old son of a woman he knew because she had pissed him off. So this is what he was doing.
Is he writing letters to these people with this sort of stuff in them?
Well, this is all on these chat rooms, right? This is where he came across Plum as well. So I think one of the chat rooms was called, I can't remember what it was something called like Celebrity Stalkers or something, really. So like these people have these fantasy lives. Now with Mark Mulligan, the reason we wrote about him at the time was because he was on these dating profiles and, obviously
dressed as He-Man.
Well, he was dressed as He-Man in them, but also...
Swipe.
This is with, so, I mean, on one level he's talking about raping children and kidnapping people, and on his dating profile though, he wrote at the time, I'm easygoing, enjoy walking, photography, I go to the cinema now and then, and enjoy when I can going to the theatre and comedy gigs.
And put up that photograph of himself.
Yeah, and I've taken to walking again to lose a few pounds. You know, I'm a really nice guy. And maybe we could go on a first date, and so he's not into one night stands or anything. So it was just a contradiction.
Sorry to harp on about it, but was that the only photograph he put up of himself?
No, there was a couple of other photographs.
More normal looking ones.
Looking really normal.
Okay.
Looking really normal.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a quirky one. So I suppose what you see is that, you know, the difference between his presentation on social media and the reality of what he was up to. And I suppose the point about all these things is that the internet allows these kind of people to interact with each other that they never would have.
These chat rooms basically are where they can talk to one another, and I suppose then swap and share their fantasies and maybe grow their fantasies because they're talking to like-minded individuals.
100%. I mean, so I just found the name of the online chat room, and it's called Abduct Lovers. So like, it's not a normal thing. So people, what they say is that this kind of fantasy life, that it can be escalated certainly by the ability to share it, to normalize it, to swap tips. And obviously it came to light, Plum was arrested because the US had an undercover officer who was on one of these chat rooms, and he was tracked down through that.
Sorry, the reason I'm looking for that is there was another similar name on the chat room. The name was so kind of almost obviously linked to, it was like celebrity
that was
kidnaps or something was the name of the chat room.
Yeah. So, I mean, he'd asked a couple of questions about how to not get caught when you're trying to kidnap celebrities and all this. Look, I suppose it's...
So these two, your guy, which we'll call him, Mark Mulligan and Plum, meet in this chat room.
Yeah.
And they do exchange, Plum exchanges with him the plan he has to kidnap, abduct and kill Holly Willoughby.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose the reason that he was given such a lengthy sentence and it was taken so seriously is because he had taken a number of practical steps, according to the prosecution. Maybe not necessarily to carry out the actual physical abduction, but he'd gone to the lengths of buying a certain kit, buying, I think it was bleach to clean the scene. You know, he'd completed an abduction kit, handcuffs, metal cable ties. So there would be... His
plan was to break into Holly Willoughby's house and to overcome both her and her husband, and then to kidnap her. And he was going to hold her, in his mind, in a sort of a remote farmhouse, which he was hoping to identify. But he was on to Mark Mulligan because he needed an accomplice.
Yeah. Well,
and that's what he was trying to communicate with him. He was telling him his plan and they were having this. But eventually, I think in 23, the Irish guy, Mulligan, pulls out.
Yes.
He, for whatever reason, isn't exactly given, but he seems to certainly pull back a bit. He doesn't want to be involved in this anymore.
So, I mean, Plum as well, like you heard as well, that he had previous convictions for kind of attempts to, or what appeared to be attempts to abduct women, that he'd come before the courts before. There was one of them involved where he had approached a woman on a train who he had claimed to be an undercover police officer. He had looked to take her off the train and bring her to this location. She'd obviously become wary and had refused and reported it then, and he had been convicted of that in a court of law. So I think what you see with Plum was there was a number of aggravating factors in terms of the sentencing and being brought to it.
He has proved in the past that he is prepared to certainly do things that look as if he is acting upon these fantasies. So he's not just somebody sitting in a room.
Which is, of course, was his defence. I mean, his defence was given that he was a fantasist, that he was never going to do any of this stuff, that it was merely just getting a kick out of sharing it on the internet. A novel defence he gave was that he was too fat to carry it out. Effectively, he said he was approaching 30 stone, and that one of the fantasies involved him climbing over the back wall, and he wouldn't be able to do that.
He might have had a bit of a point on that one.
But he might have, but I
mean, the photograph of him being arrested at his home last October by police after he was entrapped by the US officer he has no top on, and he's just huge guy. He's totally
a huge
obese.
guy. And I mean, but even when he was arrested, he was confronted by the police and he said, well, I'm not going to lie, she is a fantasy of mine. So I think the court's made a distinction between obviously sharing stories about...
These guys punch very high, don't they?
They do punch high.
There's 1,000 photographs of Holly Willoughby on his phone when the phone was seized.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really... Look, these people are...
It's part of that sort of, a lot of them. And obviously the court found that he had acted out on certain fantasies in the past and obviously was a danger, etc. But I mean, what is their obsession with women on TV?
Well, I think it's because these people it's the same of any obsession people have with fame to a degree. But I think for these guys, they're carrying these feelings of being nobody and insignificant and powerless, and nobody wants to talk to them, nobody wants to be around them. They're nobodies, they're scorned, and the idea that they could then project power over a good-looking, attractive, famous woman, I think that's why they focus on those people, because it's a way to feel empowered. And obviously that's part of his whole that abducting and holding her under his control. It's a way to feel significant and not.
But a lot
of
these stalker types seem to think that they're almost nearly star-crossed lovers with people that they don't know, but who are in their living rooms all the time.
Yeah,
there's a loneliness to that as well.
There's a loneliness to that, but there's also a belief that if Holly Willoughby sees him as being some either powerful or attractive, that that'll transform how he feels about himself, I suppose.
That's what that He-Man costume's all about.
Yeah. It's projecting a fantasy, and it's projecting it on somebody else. And I mean, I think Holly Willoughby gave a statement, and you can only imagine that as she hears about this, which is at least a plot that has begun, it must be terrifying, and it must be very, very strange.
I'd say the strangest and most terrifying thing for her was, in a way, it was all over before she got to hear about it.
Yeah.
He was arrested. Before the police even came to her, they had uncovered this. So all of this was going on. In a way, if you were getting little sort of, an idea, if you're getting letters or you're getting emails or something like that from somebody, it wouldn't maybe be such a shock. But in this case, they have come to her with the case complete, essentially. They've got him. They found all this stuff on his phone, and they're telling her this is what he was planning.
Yeah.
It's scary. And you knew nothing about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really, it must be a horrible experience. And look, I mean, these people are dangerous, dangerous people. But it's amazing that...
I mean, you could sort of, say that certain amounts of that attention go with celebrity, but I think in the UK in particular, everybody's still very conscious of Jill Dando and what happened to her. I mean, she was murdered, and there was also a politician murdered by sort of a crazed obsessive person. So it is... Sometimes it does come to that horrendous end.
Yeah,
I mean, something that starts as a fantasy and as a belief that you have this connection with somebody who's on a television.
Yeah, I mean, it does obviously happen to male celebrities and people like John Lennon and things like that. But there is a real and genuine danger, and yeah, it's just funny. There is a big focus on TV female reporters. For these kind of stalker guys, it does seem to be something they fixate on for a certain reason, even more so than maybe other types of celebrities, though, of course, that happens as well.
There's been quite a few reports of stuff with RTE, female reporters, and I think Virgin Media as well.
So it's something about it that must activate. I think it's the fact that they're in some of these reporters are sort of serious journalists as well. I think that kind of adds to what they want to be, the people they want to be regarded by, if you know what I mean, these stalker and obsessive types.
I'm glad to say I don't understand any of it, so I'm glad to say I don't, because it is very difficult to try and bring yourself into a mind that is so damaged like that. It
is, and it's just funny, the presentation of that guy, Mark Mulligan, because I remember it at the time, and looking through the social media profiles, which were kind of open at the time, and it was all so harmless and deliberately mild-mannered in public.
I'm always warning people about those dating sites and the kind of people, and they go, "You're just, a
dinosaur."
Well, a dinosaur, but also, I suppose, paranoid or cynical or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think they are.
Well, they're designed
hiding places. I mean, for all these kind of types.
Yeah, but look, obviously,
not all.
No. Obviously, there's so many regular people on it. But I suppose if you are of that type that you want to project something that you're not, there's no better way than internet dating.
My reasoning in it is because of this, right? I suppose before any of that existed, these people had to present themselves as normal. Or in some way normal, which takes a lot for some of them. And they couldn't sort of hide behind the, photographs of other people, or they couldn't hide behind text messages. So a lot of those relationships seem to start with messaging, and then excuses for not being able to show up and all this sort of stuff. But in the past, they did have to try and present themselves because they had to physically meet somebody.
Sure, and they had to go to a local pub where some guy would go, "Oh yeah, well, I'd be a bit wary of him."
You wouldn't go near him. Are there actions or something about them just says to you there's something wrong here, because I think it's harder for people to keep up a pretense of normality when they're in the physical moment than it is behind these keyboards and behind text messages and stuff like that. And they can lure people in. Not that, I mean, it's a separate issue. Like Holly Willoughby wasn't being
but it is
communicated with by this guy. It was just.
But I suppose that's the internet does give people the opportunity to present a certain view to the world, and then to seek out other people who have a very, very distorted view of the world. So it is a funny thing, but it's not going away. I suppose social media and the internet. So.
You just stay off all those sites, won't you?
I'll try.
I'm always telling them. Right. Okay. Have a good day.
You too, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.